Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I'm Laura Rankhorn.
And I'm Kim Crumbly. And together we are
Counselor Accents. And we are just completely honored to have Michael McKnight with us. He works for the New Jersey Department of Education. He is an expert when it comes to, well, you say you're not an expert, but from what I've read up on you, you are an expert. You've worked with special education. It sounds like you've done a lot. You've worked in all different areas of education. We are honored to have you with us. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
All right, thank you very much. I started out my career as a special ed teacher for what the system calls emotionally disturbed adolescents. I called them troubled children and kids, but I taught as a classroom teacher, high school level, troubled kids for 14 years. In 3 different states. And then I became an administrator for a program here in southern New Jersey, Atlantic County, for kids ages 5 to 21 that have been removed from regular schools for behavioral and emotional issues. And I did that for a little bit over a decade. And I like to tell people that's when all my hair fell out. But certainly they forced my learning and still drive my learning, and that 25 years with hands-on kids in that realm continue to drive my learning. I also get to adjunct at a local university, Stockton University, and get to teach future teachers now. So that's great to be able to share with them. And I work with the 13 school districts in Cape May County and share a lot of this work that we'll be talking about.
That's incredible. And yet you still have time to talk with us. Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
It's fun.
Just before we get into some of the questions we had, a thought came to me, and I just want to unpack this with you. You were in special ed, and you dealt with students who had emotional disturbances, behavior issues. Mm-hmm. Do you think that we've made a lot of changes in how we view these students and how to treat students who have the behavior issues, or do you think we've come far enough along where we work? I used to be a special ed teacher myself, and it was a few years back, and I just wonder your thoughts on how we view these children.
I don't think we've come very far at all, to tell you the truth. I still think often these young people end up in our backup discipline systems more than any other group. I think they're underclassified. Often school districts don't even classify these kids. They just kind of treat them as those kids that are misbehaved or discipline problems or have bad attitudes. So yeah, over my career, I think it's still one of the least accepted ideas. I think the trauma-informed movement may begin to help that a little bit, and I'm certainly hopeful about that.
Laura and I have said on our podcast before, especially if you've been in education a while, from what I have seen in my experience is when I first started, there were outliers, students who were outliers, and they needed a lot of help with behavior, but it just seems like that group has grown and grown and grown until now that's more of a prevalent number. And do you find that everywhere?
Yes, we do. I think, and it's directly related to stress, and stressed families have stressed children. And so as the stress on our families continues to get higher and higher, we're seeing kids coming into our preschools. New Jersey is one of the leading states in opening preschools in public schools. We have a lot of 3- and 4-year-old programs, and we're seeing 3-year-olds that are coming into school completely dysregulated. So much so that we actually had to pass a state law that you couldn't suspend preschoolers. Yes, we're seeing more kids that are coming to school dysregulated, and certainly not ready to sit and learn.
I love that quote. That I just wrote it down. The stressed families have stressed children, and I think that's so important for us to remember that families look different than they used to, and that's something Kim and I say a lot. A lot of times I think that we get into our bubble of maybe how we grew up or what our perception is of what a family has always been, and we forget that there's more stress. Kim, you know the statistic of the information overload that students have, that children have, and just all of that contributes to the stress on the family unit. And that was a great quote.
But yet, Laura, I feel like teachers are coming out of college, they're not ready to deal with a classroom, and now it's not the one. It could be more than one, and they do not know how to manage our and even counselors, we're overwhelmed in our system. Our mental health workers, we're overwhelmed. Our social workers, I don't know the answer, and we certainly looking for any helps that we can get.
We're seeing that all over the country, actually. So don't feel like it's just happening in your world. I think our teacher prep programs have focused almost exclusively on, can the kids pass these tests to become teachers, but they get very little in the way of anything that will help them walk into today's classroom anywhere really with 25 or 30 kids and begin to teach, which is really the hardest part of teaching. I think is how do you manage kids? How do you set that classroom up? And yet, and we see the results of that. Many people leave our profession. I've heard it called the profession that eats its young. More young teachers leave our profession now more than ever, and I think it's directly related to what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
That really is. Kim and I say a lot of times when we have these conversations, our mind just starts going in 1,000 different directions. And that's what you have done for me just now. And I love it. But okay. I mean, it's like, I'm thinking about how as counselors, we take care of the students, but it's almost like we need to think also about educating educators and preparing them for what they may see. Because I think we get this concept in our head, like I said a second ago, of a perfect classroom with 20 students who are eager to learn, and that's just not the reality.
Absolutely. A lot of my work, along with my friend and co-author and great buddy, we do a lot of trainings together. We always start with adults, the teachers. Because you have to be regulated. A dysregulated adult cannot regulate a kid. So how do you begin to regulate your staff? How do you create an environment that's regulating in schools for the staff, so that they're not dysregulated along with the kids?
Exactly.
And so it's much more than just here's what you do to the kids. It's really about how do we prepare ourselves to walk in stressful environments and begin to be able to teach a group of kids that carry in all kinds of difficulties. So anything that counselors can do to support teachers in that work, because even I think teachers always stop in and see you guys
Right.
after school, before school, and I think you're a great source and always have been of kind of, hey, let me go just chit chat here and kind of get a sense of how I'm doing. That's what your role is way past just the kids.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. I know even working with high school teachers, because they're dealing with kids who are often larger than they are. And I've had several conversations with teachers is, I'm telling you, do not trigger this student. Do not engage. And if we don't lose that old mindset of, you are going to mind me, I'm telling you what to do, and you're going to do it, because some of these kids, they will go down with the ship, but you'll go down with them, and when they're smaller, we can help them
pick them up anyway. Yeah, kind of move them, but not when they're bigger.
No, and it can get, I think though, from what I've seen with this SEL movement, and I think the trainings that I'm starting to see in schools, maybe, as you said, we're starting to head in a direction that may, because it's just so prevalent now. So anyway, Laura, we had some questions that we really, really need some help with.
Yes, and I am loving this conversation and what you're telling us. So we may get back to this too, but let's talk about, you talked about teachers who are coming right out of school, and let's talk about that. Can you explain the whole ACEs program and what an ACEs score would be to a new educator who has never heard of it before?
And most still haven't, and even here in New Jersey anyway. I mean, it's certainly gotten around in the last 3 or 4 years, but prior to that, not too many of us had heard about it at all. My background led me to that a while ago, but so I'll explain a little bit about the history of ACEs, and it goes way back, believe it or not, to 1985. With Dr. Vincent Folletti, who was studying actually obesity, and somehow bumped into another doctor, Robert Anda, who at the time was studying the connection between depression and heart disease. And these two doctors got together, and it's interesting because in 1985 to find each other wasn't as easy as it is today,
right?
Without any internet, or you just you found each other through reading articles. So it kind of very different world today. But together, those guys decided to conduct a study. Investigating the connection of what happens to people in their lives to later health and life outcomes. So the conversation started then. That study was not done until the original ACEs study was done in 1995 at Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. And the original study included over 17,000 people, mostly middle class people. In the study, and they were followed for 15 years. And the original ACEs questionnaire included 10 questions. Newer studies have expanded past 10 questions, but the original 10 questions really asked people yes or no questions on these 10 areas. One, yes or no, any history before the age of 18 with sexual abuse, any history with verbal abuse. The third ACE was physical abuse. The fourth ACE was, did you have a family member with a mental illness? The fifth ACE, did you have a family member struggling with drugs or alcohol? the sixth ACE, a mother who was a domestic violence survivor. Was that part of your background? Or a family member who had been incarcerated was the seventh ACE. The eighth, a loss of a parent from a divorce or abandonment was an ACE. The ninth, emotional neglect, and the 10th, physical neglect. So there are 10 ACEs in the original study. It was the first time researchers had looked at the effects of several types of trauma at the same time. They had been studying prior to that individual things, but this was their attempt to really see an integration of various traumas in kids' lives and how many people had. The participants in that original study were middle class, as I had said, and the average age was 57 years old. So that's kind of the original group. The findings were shocking to the doctors. Childhood trauma, they found, was extremely common. There was a direct link between the ACEs, which measure trauma, and adult onset of chronic disease, as well as depression, suicide, being violent, or being victims of violence. The more ACEs that the person had, one of those, it was counted as an ACE, the more social emotional problems those folks had later in their lives. The study found people usually experience more than just one ACE. They come in clusters. So if you have one, you're more likely to have more than one. In the original study, 2/3 of the people had one ACE. And out of that first 2/3, 87% of them had more than one. So they cluster together. And as ACEs go up, risk in many areas increase. For instance, people with 4 or more ACEs are 14 times more likely to have a suicide attempt. So 4 or more ACEs increases that by 14 times. People with 4 or more ACEs are more likely to engage in have sex before the age of 15, they found. So early risk for that. 4.5 times more likely to develop depression, 4 or more ACEs. And they even found that people with 6 or more ACEs died 20 years earlier than someone with no ACEs. So those adversities, which are what ACEs are, really affect not just the physical body, but affect the whole body. And we know that more and more now, and that's kind of been where it's going. There is a great 1-hour documentary that I show to everybody I can. Every teacher in our county has seen this documentary. It's called Resilience: The Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. It is a great introduction to teachers, educators. I show, when I say teachers, I mean everybody in the school. Secretaries, bus drivers, custodians, all really need this basic information, and it's a great way to put everybody in one place and introduce it in a school. And I give out the ACEs survey afterwards, and we talk about some of the findings. And we talk a little bit, we don't give the ACEs survey out to kids in the school. That's a no-no. It's an adult instrument. But we can certainly talk with small groups of teachers about what they know, or a little bit about a kid's background. And you quickly see that what schools are struggling with, their behavioral problem kids are carrying in tons of adversity. These are kids in pain. So we reframe behavioral problems as pain-based behaviors by kids in pain. And that, that's how you kind of start, or we think you can begin to connect the dots there between ACEs, stress, and behavior in kids.
So this is not an instrument for children at all.
No, and because everybody has jumped on it, I've seen some schools actually, ask kids about their. No, this is not a kid instrument. It is really. It doesn't even really matter which ACEs a person has. If you look at your lives and what we know about most of our kids over time, we can guesstimate what number of ACEs they have. We don't have to be exact, but it kind of links the idea of, yikes, our toughest kids are coming from very tough environments. So yeah, it's not a kid instrument. It's something. It's a lens you can look at as you're looking into the lives of the kids you're working with, particularly your hardest kids.
In thinking about this, Laura and I, I'm like you, Laura, my mind's going all different directions, and I want to go back to the questions of the ACEs. But before we move off this not being a kid, this is not a test designed for students. Laura and I both, and a lot of school counselors use minute meetings, or where we will meet with every single child, or either survey children, and not necessarily with these particular questions, but it might be a survey to determine those students who may, be going through a parental, parents are going through a divorce, or parent is incarcerated, or different questions that just kind of allow us to see where we may need to focus more of our attentions or develop small groups. Is that similar, and do you feel like it's okay to do it that way, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends, is my thought. What kind of relationship you have with those kids. Certainly keeping anything you hear confidential. Those kind of things, because really what we're talking about with ACEs is toxic levels of stress, and these 10 aren't the end all in stress in families, right? It just was a snapshot really of what stress could be. So it really doesn't matter. We kind of see, we can get a good sense of what's going on in the lives of kids by watching kids. And we get to know their families. We get to see them. We get to kind of visit with them. So you can kind of pick up that information without directly needing to ask a kid. Now, if a kid self-discloses or something like that, that's fine, in counseling. But often, these kids, and remember when you were a kid, you thought what you had, everybody had. So this isn't these are normal circumstances for everybody, is whatever your family is, right? You don't want to shake up a little kid's worldview in any way. So as we train our staff, we're real careful about that. We've got a good sense. Look at how this kid can't sit still, right? Or can't pay attention. We'll see 3 pretty good outcomes behaviorally in these kids. See if you agree with me. First, kids will react to stress by becoming externalizers. They externalize all their energy. Usually these kids can be bullies. These kids can be hostile to adults. These kids certainly are hostile to other kids, but they're also powerful kids. We call those kids externalizers. They take their stress response and externalize it. Other kids take those stress responses and internalize it. That's where you see the depression. You can see cutting. You can see self-injury. These kids kind of blame themselves for the stress in their lives. And in New Jersey, we're seeing kids that are cutting it in fourth grade. So we're seeing that stress response. It goes out or it goes in. And then the last kid, we call kids that, all these kids, by the way, are in a persistent state of alarm. They're all, all these kids are that. It looks like ADHD in many kids. And often we overdiagnose ADHD kids. And these kids don't have ADHD. They're coming out of toxic levels of stress, either in their homes or their communities.
I am taking notes like crazy.
I know. I'm writing notes like crazy too.
So it's the stress we really want to get through to teachers, because the brain learns best in a state of relaxed alertness. So what we talk about is, how do we as teachers begin to get kids in that state? Okay. So that's kind of a lot of what in our second book that Lori and I wrote, Eyes Are Never Quiet. The whole back of that book is filled with activities that teachers can do that are fun. And it's not cognitive. It's movement, it's breath. And it's fun activities. And the idea is to relax the entire nervous system and provide a sense of safety for kids.
Well, I know where I'm going right after this, and that is to order the book.
And Laura, when would we ever need that tool more than now?
Exactly.
Because think about the state of stress that we're all under.
Right.
Yep.
Amazing amount. Even when we think we're not.
Right.
I think everybody's going to come back with some sense of trauma. And this could be an amazing tool to get students ready to learn, because we've got to get past that. Even the superintendent mentioned taking care of the social emotional aspect of our students. So it's on everybody's mind, and what we want them to return to as much normalcy. We want them to learn. So these activities I can see to get students in a relaxed, alert state, ready to learn.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have even seen some sensory paths built on hallway floors. Those are fun to do. I still like doing those when I see them.
Sure.
What we see is rather than give teachers more lessons to prepare and deliver, we see these as being able to be integrated into their procedures and practices, into their routines. How do we do that? And we see teachers as weathermen. I've got two major jobs. I've got to calm kids down, and I've got to wake them up, right? So you guys want to do a wake-up activity with me now?
Of course.
All right.
Laura needs to.
All right, so I would like you to make a peace sign in one hand and an okay sign in the other. Now, when I say go, I want you to switch back and forth as fast as you can. Ready, set, go.
I'm afraid I'm going to do something inappropriate.
No, I've been known to do that too, and that's okay. Kids will laugh at you. But this does a couple things. Not only do we do these activities, we teach kids about their brains at different levels. So they're learning how the brain develops from the bottom to the top. The top part of the brain develops last. It is not fully developed until around age 25 to 30. So none of us in preschool to 12 are teaching a finished brain. Brain intervals, which we just did, are designed to wake up the brain. And what we do is practice them. If you do these for a few days in a row, you will get faster and faster and faster at it. And you're actually rewiring your brain. And that's the connection to it. So it's not just doing fun activities. It's got this is why, this is what's happening, and if you want to get better at something, you got to do it a lot. So there's a lot of those kind of connections that are great for teachers, and you don't have to be a brain expert. I'm not a neuroscientist by any stretch, but it's fun learning about it, right? And most of social emotional learning, and I love it, is still in schools done up here. We want to work lower down here in the, to lower. We teach about the amygdala. The amygdala, your amygdala, we teach them it's up right here. We make them put their hands there. It's like your smoke detector. It's your fight, flight reflex. It's designed to protect you. Your most troubled kids, though, their amygdalas are in a persistent state of alarm. That's why they're so easily set off. You get kids that, hey, what happened? Another kid looked at him funny or brushed into him, God forbid. Those are the kids that they're not bad kids. They have a system, though, that is in that alarm state, and anything that happens, they overreact to.
Yeah.
It's like you described my working relationship with Kim. I brush into her, she goes nuts. It's just...
Yeah, there you go.
Stay away from me. That's exactly what I was describing with some of these. When these children get bigger than we are as teachers,
Oh, yeah.
these teachers will not understand. It's not about you. It's about their flight or fight, and they are going to take you down. My mind, I'm just soaking this in because I'm rethinking, Laura, some of the things that we have been doing,
right,
and then we to relook at. I've often said, don't open a Pandora's box, because sometimes I think we go looking as counselors, delving into students, and as you said, sometimes they don't perceive an issue, and sometimes we make an issue.
right.
And I think going back, we have to be very careful that we are tending to needs, but we're not creating needs. Does that make sense? And do you guys agree?
I certainly agree. Because many things, even if we open that box, we can't fix. And let's be real. I mean, there's kids in America that are living in not great situations, and even if they reveal most of them to us, we can't fix that. What we need to do, and the resiliency research is really clear and hopeful with these kids, and it boils down to connection. It boils down to one adult connection over time. That they're not fixing anything. They're supporting that kid over time. Literally changes the direction of these kids' lives. The resiliency research is extremely powerful. There's over 40 years of it now, and that's the finding. So think about this: if we could hand off our most troubled kids more intentionally between teachers. Rather than say, oh, you're going to get Joey next year, wait till you see him. We're doing this in a much different way, okay? We've recognized him. Lori and I even call it dosing. All kids need doses of connection from teachers. It's really about connection and love, really. We don't use the word, but that's what dosing is. How do I connect with you? How do I make a relationship with you? Our most troubled kids need more doses. They need more connections with adults. They need to be passed off well from elementary school to middle school to high school, and we don't do that well at all in any schools. So those are the things we're trying to turn around. Can we see schools as a place to really support these kids? Learn how to regulate their nervous system. We see discipline as regulation, and we teach teachers and others, how do you co-regulate an upset child? You don't yell at them. That just upsets them more. So that co-regulation shifts discipline in a very different way. We're regulating the nervous system. We're not punishing kids, which really ends up dysregulating them and disconnecting them more. There's a favorite saying I have. It goes something like this: punishment works best with kids that need it the least, and it works the least best with kids that need it the most. It's backwards. And we see it every day in our schools. So that's kind of, we want to identify those kids. We want to dig into your discipline data and really take a look at who are those repeat offenders that are all, and we all got them. Those are the kids we're talking about. We don't need an A score on them. Guaranteed they're coming out of those places.
Right.
Right.
I think of fear for counselors, and I guess it's I've done K through 12, and what about I think always, and Laura knows this, I think because of past issues, things that have come up, but what about those students that might be internalizing, but we don't know? I'm always afraid that there's that student, I have no idea that they're this close to, harming themselves, and we're not picking up on it. Do you have any thoughts on those students that do internalize, but if we're not getting a score on those students, and we're not seeing it at school, do you have any thoughts or suggestions on that?
Yeah, a little bit. Nothing perfect though, and just another statistic. If you guys haven't Googled into the Children's Defense Fund, do check out that work by Marian Wright Elderman, and she's got some great statistics on a lot of stuff that I share with teachers too. Her latest data is that every day in the United States of America, 8 children or teens die by suicide. That's every day, daily in America. So, a lot of times what we're also trying to build with the culture of safety is not just safety toward adults toward kids and kids for adults, but kids with kids. And how do you create peer helping groups that support each other? Because often what we've seen here is sometimes, or we'll hear those messages from other students, not the student themselves, that are worried about their friend. And with those kind of relationships, that's what we really want. That net of support that we can weave, that includes the kids, and talking about, what to share and what not to share. And as you guys are doing counseling groups, I don't think that's a bad message to put out to kids, is if your friend is in trouble, please let us know, because we'll help them.
You're right, especially as these kids get older. They don't come to us as in a lot of what we see in middle school and high school, in my experience, has come from other students. Yeah. So you're right. And it might be a call at night. It could be a message sent to us in the middle of the night, hey, I'm worried about, but you're absolutely right. It's oftentimes not coming from the student themselves. But I think that's important for us to remember, Laura, as counselors. We've got to keep getting that message to students. If you hear something, say something. If you know something, say something.
Yeah, it's really, I think, really important. And as you said, yeah, absolutely, as they get older, because they're going to hear about that stuff, and that, I really, we're looking at, that soil of what my school soil is like, and for everybody. So the other thing, we're doing 3-day resiliency team trainings here in New Jersey with school teams. Lori and I do them. They're turnkey trainings. So the school sends us a team. They learn a bunch of stuff, and our goal is to have them go back to their schools and spread it. So that's fun to do. We won't do a team without a school administrator on it. And we also ask the schools to do climate and culture surveys. So we're asking kids, we're asking teachers, we're asking parents how they feel about their school. And again, we're looking for school connectedness. So that, and you can, with connectedness comes safety, right? So we really want to ask our constituents, how do they feel about this place they're spending this much time in? And that data we're using as a baseline, and then trying to change some of the culture and practices, along with looking at the discipline data, the kick out of classes, the suspension rate, in school, out of school, how many times are kids being sent to the office, who are they? And then quickly, I mean, you can get a team around that really easily and go, oh yeah, you know, I know this kid, we had his brother, and he came from the same kind of mess. So it's interesting. Along the lines of what you were saying earlier, the other person I wanted to mention was Dr. Wendy Ellis. Dr. Wendy Ellis has done some work around the pair of ACEs, where she combines not only the 10 ACEs, but adverse community environments too. Places of high poverty, for instance, housing instability, food insecurity, also adds to the stress of families. And just recently, Wendy has added COVID-19 to the pair of ACEs, because we know that it's affected everybody, but it has certainly affected our minority communities much more, and our communities of poverty much more than some of our other communities. So she's worth Googling too. I love her work. She's working in whole community change, which has been fun.
I have a question that may be a little bit selfish.
That's okay.
I am going to be moving to a different school, and I'm hearing you talk about this, and I'm wondering what your advice would be to a counselor going into a new school or a brand new counselor coming in. What would your advice be on being proactive to learn about these situations without doing a whole lot of digging? What would you, or not, and when I say digging, I mean like what Kim was talking about, opening Pandora's box that doesn't need to be opened by the students. So what would you recommend for a new counselor?
I would, that's a great question, actually. I would recommend getting to know your administrators very well. What do they think about their schools? What do they think about, discipline? Are they traditionalists? Are they more, where are they on that spectrum? Just do a snapshot. I would hang out in the teacher's lounge and listen to how they talk about kids, which kids they kind of talk about. Get a sense of this. Does the school know anything about ACEs? Where are they with their thinking about ACEs, trauma? What are they currently doing? And you'll get a feel. I'm sure you already have, or you probably wouldn't have went for what the school is like too. And we're always, when I walk into schools, you can get a feel, and every school is unique, isn't it? It's just amazing. But you get a feel. The feel I'm looking for is a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging for everybody. Does everybody seem to feel relaxed in this place? Does everybody know each other's names? Are people friendly? Those kind of things really kind of give you an idea of where you are. And then this work is slow. I mean, it can't change all this stuff overnight. It starts with just awareness. That's why, you know, I recommend that film again. It's an hour long, but it kind of, depending on what your demographic is like in your school, it kind of can click. As I look at the demographic in your state, you know, you've got in Alabama, 1 out of every 5 kids in your state are poor. That goes up drastically to 41% of your black kids, and the latest I've seen, 38% of your Hispanic kids. But I don't know what your individual school demographics are. I look at free and reduced lunch counts as far as, you know, stress levels in schools. I don't know, you know, that's a good indicator of from a far away place without going to visit of stress in families. You know, you guys have you know, numbers listed that are pretty high in your state. As of 2020, the fact sheet I've gotten, you know, over 12,000 kids found to be abused and neglected. Who are your kids from foster care? I don't know if you have those kids in your schools, but those kids always now are carrying, you know, don't even have to look. They carry toxic stress. You know, so I think you know, that would be giving you a nice sense of where you landed, Laura. Well,
great advice, and so many, as we like to say, rubber meets the road ideas. And before I want to list some of those, Laura, at the, you know, some of the film and some of his books and those kinds of things at the end, because there's a lot of things that we can start digging in and start actually doing. These are ideas that we can actually start doing.
So do you guys, the other question I have for you guys, do you have school resource officers?
We do.
We do. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this has reached Alabama. I started to do some work with police completely by accident. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I was always very afraid of the police in Philadelphia growing up, for probably good reason. But a police chief and a local police chief came and saw a presentation on ACEs. And long story short, we've started a program here in our whole county. It's called Handle with Care. And what it is it's a simple program. If the police are called to any student's house that evening, regardless of why, and there's kids in the house, the school gets a notice from the police department that, and all it says is handle with care and the kid's name. It doesn't say what happened. It doesn't say why it happened. No information. But it just gives the school a heads up that something might have happened. It usually goes to the principal. And the principal usually at least talks to the teacher and say, hey, if you notice anything different, just, you know, step back a little bit, give this kid some space. No prying or asking them what happened or what happened. But it's been, we were literally shocked at the numbers of visits and school notices that the school got. And it really was a nice connection. It often then goes from the principal to you guys, to counselors. If that kid does need somebody to talk to through his behavior, you know, again, we don't pry into what happened, but just to try to give that kid some supports during the day. So that's another pretty simple kind of thing. Dead accident. The Handle with Care program, actually, the chief of police found it out of West Virginia, but we're trying to do that weaving net in communities for all our kids.
What a great collaboration, and so simple. And what a great impact that would make. We have a podcast coming up later with SRO, and they kind of handle situations.
Sure.
I don't, I know it. I don't know exactly, but that is a wonderful, wonderful idea.
Well, it takes all pieces of the puzzle. If the school resource officer has that piece of the puzzle about who they visited the night before, we certainly need that in the school, and we have information that they need. And so it really just takes all of us. You mentioned the resilience documentary that you recommend that secretaries see it, and custodians, because we all see parts of a student's life. And so when we're all working together, we complete the puzzle. So that's such great advice.
I know we have kept you a long time, and so I will wrap up, but I do want to ask you about a lot of the stress that we adults have. I'm sure, we pass that on, as you said, to our students. Do you recommend, like the ACES, doing a program with your teachers and helping them explore maybe the trauma they've had in their lives that we may be passing on? I mean, how do you use this, or have you, with educators going through this? I
have actually passed out the ACES screen with educators after that film. We certainly don't talk about it publicly, but we let them know that the film does a great job of letting them know how common ACEs are. And it also does a nice job of what the antidote is, which is connection and relationship. So you could have a lot of ACEs, but if you have those connections, now every once in a while, we'll get somebody that wants to share, and I'll in that group setting, but I don't process it like that. I just kind of leave it pretty private. But often adults will speak up. And say, wow, it starts even connecting dots for themselves.
Is this something that we could do? I mean, is this something that we could show this film with our faculty or our listeners, or would we need more training and then give the survey?
I think one, I would certainly watch it first. So, you guys know your staff, your audience better than I do. But I've even showed it in public viewings to people, to adults that I don't even know. We had a local movie theater offers for us to share it. And we shared it in a movie theater, and people came, kind of set it up a little bit. For people that have never heard of anything. But the documentary, you'll see Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, you'll see the two originators of the study, where it came from, and then you'll even see a school that is an elementary school that is working through it, and some of what they're doing. It's just the easiest way to begin to get this information out there in a safe way. And even if you just share the ACEs survey, you don't have to process it with anybody at all. I don't. I'm pretty safe with going anywhere with people. They'll come see you afterwards. You guys know that.
Yeah, we do get a lot of that. We do get a lot of that, and that's okay. Because ultimately, it helps the students. If we can help the teachers, then ultimately that helps the students, because it does trickle down to the students.
The other biggie with the shift, though, is and often schools think in black and white ways. So, this isn't about dismantling our discipline policies right away, right? I mean, this isn't an overnight change. It's not about, oh, that poor child, let them do whatever they want because I feel bad. So we've got to protect that too. These kids really need structure, predictability, routine, and consistency. That's not like, oh, I feel bad for you. You don't have to do anything. So that's a caution too. When we get into, oh, wow, we've got this, they're going to want to know, what do we do? We really still handle these children. We learn to regulate them. and our consequences we take a look at. I mean, you dirty something, you clean it up eventually. I mean, we don't have to, we can connect some of the things that we do without making a kid feel bad on top of it.
I feel like we have just scratched the surface, and there is so much more here.
Who knew he was such a treasure trove of information?
How did you guys find me anyway?
I knew.
You didn't know.
I know these things. Tell us the name of your books again, and we're going to order them today because I feel like there's some things that we can start using immediately when we go back to school with her.
The book that really I'm focused on today is called Eyes Are Never Quiet. It's on Amazon. This is Eyes Are Never Quiet. And all the activities are in the back of it. So you can play. Teachers have favorites. Our first book we wrote was called Unwritten, The Story of a Living System. And this book, it really talks about, schools as not machine, schools as living systems, and we sometimes lose the perspective because we're so used to that kind of factory model of schooling where we kind of just go through school. Some kids do it well and we give them nice awards. Other kids, we pull out and try to fix and put back on the conveyor belt. It's a very different shift, our first book, and looking at if we pictured it more like a system that's alive and what would that look like in schools and how would all kids feel. The other important message is that trauma responsive schools are good for all kids, not just kids with stress. This stuff, the practices we're talking about are good for all children, not just those other kids down the hall or wherever we put them. And so that's an important message to get to your schools too. This isn't just about those kids. All kids can benefit by this kind of work. So that's important too.
So you also have your 3-day training in New Jersey, which I'm very jealous of because we're in Alabama, but New Jersey.
So if two girls with two women with accents show up.
Well, we can do you one better this year because we've had to be forced to do it on Zoom. I'll invite you.
Oh!
It's a free training. It's free. I've been able to work with a couple of grants. So it's worked out really well. This year, we're kind of excited. I mean, Zoom's not the great. I'd rather do face-to-face. That's the best. But we're going to have people now all over the globe on this 3-day event. So I'll when we're done, I certainly will send you in your email an invite. Just go in, register, and there's 2 sessions. Pick whatever 3 days worked best for you. If you can join us, that'd be great.
Oh, that is exciting.
That's what you get for begging, Laura.
I'm not
no
above
worries.
it.
Just ask. I'm sorry. I didn't even really think about it. I'm sure I would have eventually.
So if our listeners want to join, or if they want to do one of these 3-day trainings, how would they do it? I can put it in the show notes if there's a link or anything like that. Is it?
What I send you is the link in.
Okay.
We really are looking, ideally we're looking for educators, or at least a couple of them from the same place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they can start, because they're not going to be done. This is kind of designed to kick this off. This change we recognize is easily a 4 to 6 year change in culture, school culture over time. So we want to go slow. We don't want to rush it. We don't want to make it another hot thing in education that goes away and we get the next thing. So we're interested in people that are teachers or anybody that really wants to explore this work over time.
This has been so informative, and I just feel like I want to dig into all these resources, and this has been very, very helpful, and I just can't thank you enough. I think our listeners are going to feel the same.
Great. Well, hey guys, it was really, thanks for finding me. That's great. And
Thanks for coming
and if
on.
you have questions as you're going along, feel free to just shoot me an email or anything like that. I'm really kind of, I guess you can kind of tell I'm a little passionate about the work.
We love it.
And it's just a nice stage to be in, to be able to share back all the things that you've been able to learn throughout a career. So it's in one way really kind of fun for me to be able to share with as many folks as I can.
Well, and it all benefits the students, and that's what it's all about. And let me just say here at the end, I don't claim to be a linguist, but I was expecting a New Jersey accent, and I was gonna say that you sounded like a Pennsylvania accent, and you said you grew up
Philadelphia. Yeah, it's a little different. You're pretty good.
Yeah,
and I love your guys.
The way he says America, something about the way you say America.
America.
Was a little.
That's funny.
It is. We love. That's one of our things. We just love accents. And we
I do
play
too.
games all the time. We have stopped people and said, "You're from," it's
very cool.
So
yeah,
anyway.
it's really neat. It is. It's very cool. As I travel around and do different places in the country now with teachers face to face, it's fun. And I really, teachers overall really are looking for different things to do. I still think the majority of teachers are people that really want to do what's best for kids. And it's a tough job. I mean, it's just really hard to do, and it's getting harder.
It is, and I think you've given us some things to make it a little easier. So I appreciate that so much, and we'll follow your career.
Yes.
As you go forth and help others, and I hope to see you on some of this training. But thank you.
Yeah, definitely will, and I'll send you that right now. So nice meeting you guys.
Great meeting you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.